Hey folks, this is Alexander Winn. What you're about to watch is a recording of a Discord Q&A I just did, where we gathered some questions from some of our players and I chatted with them for about an hour. Unfortunately, the video cut out after about 28 minutes, the video recording, so the Q&A went on as normal, but what you're about to watch is half of it. I do these Q&As every so often on Facebook and now on Discord. I'm going to be planning on doing a Q&A video on YouTube at some point once we gather up enough questions, so definitely join in on all of our social channels and be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you can be sure to watch our upcoming videos here on YouTube. All right. How's everybody doing? Getting all set up. Union leader, you can talk. All right. So, this is me, Alexander Winn, just stopping by to say hi and answer a few questions. This is fun. It's been a little while since we've done this. I'm hanging out here on our set. At the office. I'm the only one in the office because, you know, pandemic. But, yeah, here to answer some questions, talk about TerraGenesis, and talk about some of the other cool things that we've got going on. So, I believe that we have gathered some questions beforehand. Let me see here. Right. So, just getting everything set up here. My Discord was not set up on the studio computer, so I'm having to like adjust some settings and get everything going. But thank you to everybody who's here to check it out. I'm going to do my best to upload this video later to YouTube and some of our other platforms so that we can share it with some other folks. But in the meantime, I think we've got some questions here that have been gathered. So I am in the chat, by the way, so I will do my best to respond to people as they come by. But I've got my nice little list of questions, so if anybody wants to jump in with a follow-up or anything like that, just let me know. So first up, we have a question which is, what drove me to create TerraGenesis in the first place? So basically, TerraGenesis is a game that I've always wanted to play, and I always kind of expected that someone would make a game like TerraGenesis. It's something that, you know, originally when I read the Mars trilogy, when I played Alpha Centauri, there are these sort of these hints that terraforming would make an interesting gameplay mechanic, but nobody had really leaned into it. So I had always kind of assumed that somebody was going to make a game about terraforming, and in the meantime, I kind of taught myself how to become a programmer and started making apps, and all of a sudden I looked up one day and I went, oh, I could make this game. I guess maybe I should make this game. So yeah, that was basically the inspiration behind making it. So let's see. Speaking of which, speaking of inspirations, we have a question from Fab. We understand that The Martian inspired the game as indicated by the illustration of Teihao Arataki with a rover in the background of a Martian landscape. What other space movies inspired you when writing the TerraGenesis lore? So the main thing, the biggest inspirations for TerraGenesis were the Mars trilogy of novels, which basically you could describe TerraGenesis as a adaptation of the Mars trilogy, not in any kind of specifics with characters or anything like that, but basically the Mars trilogy is about terraforming Mars, and it's about developing the society of Mars and the sort of evolving identity of the planet. And that was a huge inspiration because the movie goes in, or the books go into a lot of real science. And that was really where I first started to think, you know, this is a thing that you could turn into a game, you know? too hot, too cold, too thick of an atmosphere, too thin. It is a gameplay mechanic and a very interesting story. So that was a big inspiration. Like you said, The Martian was a big inspiration. The video game Alpha Centauri was also a big inspiration, particularly when it came to the factions. I've always loved the idea of kind of specialist societies of different factions based on different ideologies and that sort of thing. Those obviously inspired the factions of TerraGenesis. A lot of people have asked if The Expanse was an inspiration of TerraGenesis, and ironically, it was not, because I didn't know about it. I had never heard of The Expanse. I had never encountered The Expanse until later on into the release of TerraGenesis. It was only like last year, I think, that I had ever really heard about The Expanse. But that has been a good one as well since then. So yeah, those are the main inspirations. Let's see, what was that boom? That boom was my phone, which I have standing up in front of me with a list of questions falling down on the table. So, terribly uninteresting, I apologize. So, next up, what gave you the idea for the various factions and their stories from Black Sail? So, originally when TerraGenesis shipped, for anybody who may be a new player, right now we have five factions. And originally, when we first launched the game, we had 4. So we had the Daughters of Gaia, the Sons of Hephaestus, the United Nations Space Administration, and the Horizon Corporation. And each of them represent kind of a different take on how the future might go, basically. You know, the Daughters of Gaia were heavily influenced by Alpha Centauri and represented kind of the pure terraforming aesthetic. They were a group who wanted to terraform, who wanted to spread life. I also took some sort of future, feminism and that sort of thing, made them a matriarchal society, and really just kind of leaned into the terraforming of it all. It is, after all, a terraforming game, so having one faction be particularly focused on terraforming made sense. Naturally, then, there was room for the opposite of that. And in particular, anybody who's read the Mars trilogy will be really struck by the Reds in Mars. And Reds in this context doesn't mean communists. It means they're the people who don't want to terraform Mars. They have fallen in love with Mars as it exists right now. And so in the Mars trilogy, there's this big political fight that develops between the Reds and the Greens, which is to say the people who want to stop terraforming and the people who want to keep terraforming. And, you know, there are people out there who don't believe in terraforming, who don't believe it would be moral, who don't believe we have the right to terraform. And so I wanted to capture that in the game, this representation of this idea that they don't, that just because the player wants to terraform doesn't necessarily mean it's a given that everyone does. We have one person here asking, was the sun's icon intended to look like a communist fist? Revolutionary fist, yeah. Not necessarily communist, but they definitely have some of that kind of uprising aesthetic in their design. So those two were kind of the first two. And then after that, you know, every great sci-fi story needs the UN, needs the Federation, the humanist society driven by actualizing everyone's potential. Obviously heavily inspired by Star Trek. Once I saw The Expanse, the UN from The Expanse is obviously a very similar group. And then, of course, we also need the opposite of that, which was the corporate faction, the Horizon Corporation, which are sort of the Blade Runner future. They're the hyper, you know, transnational corporation taking over everything kind of group. So we had those 4 for a while, and we had toyed around with the idea of introducing a 5th faction for years, and we gradually settled on this idea that the 5th faction would be a pure science faction. This is a group who doesn't necessarily want to make money, they just are in it for the discovery. And so that was something that we rolled out relatively recently, just a few months ago, was the FFI. And so that brings us to the 5 factions that we have now. Yeah. Let me see here. We've got a lot of FFI fans in the chat. Let's see. Was maintaining this game more stressful than really building it? Or would you say the first build took more stress to put out while maintaining it wasn't too difficult? Ooh, that's a good question. I've never gotten that question before. To be honest, maintaining it has been more stressful, certainly, because, you know, a lot of game developers are game developers. They this is what they do. This is their career. And when I was making TerraGenesis, it was just my hobby. I had a go into the office job. TerraGenesis was just something that I was making for fun because I thought it would be fun. You know, I had made 24 other apps on iOS at this point, and they were successful, kinda. Like, they were successful for me at the time, but they were successful in the sense that, like, one of them was getting, like, 100 users a week. You know, like, that was, like, awesome, you know? And so I made this game, and I just assumed that it was going to be another one of those. Like, it's a goofy little math simulator. Like, you know? Like, I believed that it was going to be fun, and I believed that people were going to enjoy it, but I did not expect that it would blow up the way it has. So when I was working on TerraGenesis, it was pretty relaxed. Like, I was just doing it in my spare time. It was going to take however long it was going to take, and when I was done, I'd move on to the next thing. I had actually already started working on my next project before I realized that TerraGenesis was blowing up after I released it. So since then, it's been frantically trying to fix bugs. It's been rolling out on new platforms, and, you know, there's just been a lot of activity around sort of maintaining it and building our team, building our company, building our studio, and sort of taking that baton and running with it, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So yeah, it's been a huge amount of fun, but it's also, it's been a lot. We got a question here in the chat. How did you feel when TerraGenesis blew up and garnered such a huge community around it? It's been so much fun. Like, you guys, I really can't overstate how much I love our community. Like, seriously, we have the best fans. Just the number of times that I've seen, you know, somebody will, like, come into one of our communities and try to start something, like, you know, be some troll, and people will just sort of shut it down. Like, they just, our community is really resilient and really inviting, and just, it's a really fantastic group. And I'm just so lucky to have gathered these people around something that I made and get to spend all my time with you guys. So, yeah. Let me see. Next up, also from Black Sail, how did you acquire the data to base the planets off in TerraGenesis? This is a really fun thing that I try to spread the word as far as I can. So hear me and then tell everybody you know. This stuff is free. NASA is a public agency. You know, when SpaceX starts going to Mars, I'm sure that they're going to discover things and it's going to be a corporate secret and they're going to sell information and all that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, NASA information is free. You can just go on Wikipedia. You can use planet textures. All of these things are public domain because NASA's in it for the science, not the profit. So if you want to make a game set on Venus, you just can. You can just go look up information about Venus and use planet textures and all sorts of stuff because it's out there. It's available. And I keep telling people that there is an opportunity out there for setting movies and TV shows and video games in the solar system, for doing space the way it should be done, because there's a whole universe out there that is untapped. You know, like, I have never even heard of a movie or a TV show set on Mercury. There are probably some books. Maybe there's like a video game or two that uses Mercury, but like pretty much none. It's an entire planet! And then there's Venus, and then there's Mars, and then there's all the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus, and like it goes on and on and on. They're all available for free. And that was the ideology that sort of drove TerraGenesis, and I keep trying to spread the word because it's like, imagine if you could license the Batman franchise or the Star Wars franchise for free. It's like that. It's crazy. Let's see. So, Igros, asked, how did you come up with the idea of making the different facilities in the game? So most of the facilities in the game are based on actual things, based on actual concepts that scientists have proposed. Some of them are sort of just common sense, like the Atmogen suite, I think, was... I couldn't come up with something to fill that, to come up with all the necessary gases for the atmosphere, so I was just like, atmosphere generation tool. It's the Atmogen suite. It's just sort of generic and, hey, it makes gases. Yay. But most of the things, like, you know, boreholes and solar shades and all that sort of thing are based on actual, you know, things that people have proposed as part of the settling of other planets and terraforming and hominization process. So, yeah. Let's see here. Next up. Would I terraform to paradise stats or conserve things as they are, respecting native life forms even if their habitability stats makes it impossible for us to survive in the open air? From Adrian RR 18. I may get in trouble with this because my wife and co-founder Lacey is deep Hephaestian, but I would probably be Gaian. The idea of terraforming is just so exciting to me. Honestly, what I would probably try to do is chart a middle course to terraform the planet a little bit so that humans can survive, but not necessarily to turn it into the Amazon rainforest. You know, that maybe Mars would end up sort of looking like Arizona. I know that in the Mars trilogy, there's a compromise that gets brokered where they terraform so that it's habitable below a certain elevation. But then if you go above a certain elevation up to the mountains, like Olympus Mons, it's still pristine and native. So, yeah. Athena is very exciting for me to answer their question, and I'm sure I will get to it in the list. Oh no, I'm gonna get banned. That's terrible. That's just terrible. Anyway. What faction is your personal favorite and why? This is the part where all the people who are gloating in the chat get slapped down because my personal favorite faction is not the Gaians. My personal favorite faction is probably the UNSA. FFI is also pretty great, but as the newbies, it's hard for me to have fallen in love with them as much as the factions that I've been dealing with for years and years. You know, the Gaians... I love the idea of terraforming, but part of what we did with the Gaians that I really enjoy is that we didn't make them just the good guys. They're, you know, peace-loving and beautiful and elegant and all this kind of stuff, but they're also, like, deeply imperialist and deeply, sort of violent sometimes. Like, the Gaians are sort of the Roman Empire. They're gonna bring civilization with a boot to your face, and yeah, that's the Gaians, which I really enjoy, but it sort of prevents them from being my hands-down favorite. The UNSA, I think, is the one that stands for people. It stands for doing the best by its people. So that's usually what I play as whenever I'm playtesting the game. Next up is favorite structure or facility concept. I have a soft spot in my heart for the space elevator. It's just such a cool idea, and it's such a dynamic kind of. It opens the door to so many possibilities, and to me, it perfectly straddles the line between science fiction and science fact. It's not something that we could do right now, but it's something that we could eventually do, and it's just such an iconic thing, so different from anything humanity has ever done before. It's just, the space elevator is awesome. Let's see here. No, I didn't mention your name when I was answering your question because I don't know how to pronounce it. I keep wanting to say cilantro, but I know that's not right. So, yeah. Next up, what is the Sundering and how did the UNSA stop it? Well, wouldn't you like to know? I'm not going to tell you that, but I will tell you that you'll find out soon. Next up, when was Horizon founded and how did they gain so much wealth over time? from Gaian soldiers. So the thing about the Horizon Corporation, so when TerraGenesis first launched, it's a sandbox game. There was no like story. And we had these 4 factions, but we didn't even have the characters that you see in the game right now. They didn't exist. The factions were just their logos. And so there were no characters. There was no story. There was no lore of any kind. And since then, we've been adding more lore, and we've been coming up with these different characters, and we've been doing all these different things to build out the world. And I'm really, really happy with what we've been coming up with. It's sort of the whole of humanity is represented in what we're doing, you know, on Earth and other planets, and races and genders and ages and everything. It's super fun. There is one piece of TerraGenesis lore that hasn't actually gotten into the game yet, which is the timeline of it all. And so I'm not going to be able to map it all out for you. It's something that we're going to be rolling out more in limited time events that are going to be coming up and all sorts of other things. But the short version is that when you look at the roster of governors, not all of them lived at the same time. There are some that are like separated from others by centuries. And so, to answer the question, how was the Horizon Corporation founded? The general idea behind its founding is that it was a Kenyan corporation that was sort of like the Kenyan answer to SpaceX. And Kenya, you get a boost for rocket launches if you're near the equator. And so in the world of TerraGenesis, the Horizon Corporation bases itself at, or you know, sort of markets itself as the place to do rocket launches. And they build this incredible facility for doing rocket launches, and they kind of become what SpaceX is becoming in real life, and they build this massive company around space exploration. And then they, you know, do some important mergers and that sort of thing, and it sort of eventually becomes the dominant corporation for off-Earth operations. And so that's why Apollo Matiba is the founder and CEO of the Horizon Corporation, and his daughter and granddaughter are both governors. They're all African because they are African. They're not even African American. They're actually from Africa. So that was sort of the origin of the Horizon Corporation. Let's see. So Elta Corp is asking about Rex Jansson, and are we going to find any more about Rex? There's definitely a lot more lore around Rex. Rex is one of the sort of central tent poles of the lore because he's the lightning rod around which the Hephaestus are gathering. So he's a lot of fun. I often describe, because they have this kind of revolutionary tone, I often describe the Sons of Hephaestus in terms of socialist and communist revolutions. And so in that language, Tehao is Karl Marx. She's the one who sort of outlines the doctrine of the Hephaestus, the idea of planetary purity and the conservation movement. And then Rex would be more like Lenin. He's the one who takes the ideology and says, okay, let's do this for real now. Picks up a gun and says, okay, it's time. So the relationship between those two is really fun because, you know, Karl Marx was not personally involved in the founding of the Soviet Union, and there's a difference between Leninism and Marxism and then eventually Stalinism, and all of that kind of thing is interesting to get into, and we're building a similar lore around the Hephaestus, the idea that they are not a unified group, they are a whole bunch of different people who are all responding to Tehao's ideas in different ways, and some of them are peaceful and some of them are very not. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more lore around that. Jay Grape asks, what happened during the Siege of Luna? I'm going to give you the same answer again, which is you'll find out soon enough. Did the Gaians come into any direct conflict with the Horizon and the UNSA? What did the Gaians find in Europa? Finding in Europa is a story for another time, but did they ever come into direct conflict with the UNSA and Horizon? Yes. the origin of the Daughters of Gaia is intimately tied up with the Horizon Corporation, and we've got a whole thing built out of that you will be finding out about very soon. And then coming into conflict with the UNSA is, yeah, like, those are, as the biggest factions in the solar system, the UNSA is the one who's like, you know, like legally supposed to be in charge of everybody anyway. And the Daughters of Gaia are the ascendant empire that is, you know, rapidly projecting power onto the solar stage. So that's something that we are going to be getting into a lot more later. All right, so we've got some gameplay questions here. Will the Biosphere and the random planet generator be upgraded in the future? From Lulu. My computer fell again, or my phone fell again. So never mind. Biosphere and random planet generator. So yes, random planet generator in particular, I'm constantly adding features or tweaking or adjusting or, you know, making it a little bit better. In terms of big changes, that's actually something that we're talking about and trying to come up with. Yeah, my phone hates me. Yes, Gaian soldier, you're not wrong. So yeah, we're talking about that with the Biosphere. You know, honestly, the biggest questions around the Biosphere are trying to figure out how to get more people to play it. It's a really fun system, but it's a really complicated and sort of challenging system. So we've talked about like overhauling the UI of the Biosphere system, or doing a number of other things that could encourage more players to engage with it. I think last time I checked, I think like 5% of players ever even try a Biosphere game. So yeah, trying to get more people to do it would be great. Hey Heather, how's it going? Heather's awesome. Let's see. Will there be new worlds added in the future, like the fictional ones? There's very likely going to be new worlds added in the future. Actually, I don't know if you all are following along on YouTube. If not, be sure to look up Edgeworks Entertainment on YouTube and follow us, because I've started releasing some videos each week, and the next one that we're releasing is going to be about playable worlds. So I get into a whole lot of stuff about where we're going, how we picked the playable worlds that we already have, how we developed them, and all sorts of stuff. So check that out on YouTube. They'll be coming out next week. But in the meantime, there are already some cool ones, like a Biosphere video and one about limited time events and a whole bunch of really cool stuff. Also worth mentioning, by the way, we're going to be doing a Twitch show soon, so keep your eye out for that. And that's where the video froze. The rest of the Q&A went pretty well. We chatted and just sort of hung out for the last 20 minutes or so. I answered questions as they came up. Like I said before, we do these kind of Q&A videos every so often on Facebook Live or on Discord. I'm also a pretty regular user on our Facebook fan group or on the subreddit or on Twitter, all over the place. So be sure to follow us on all your favorite social networks, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell here on YouTube so you can be notified when we upload our next video. It's going to be a pretty good one.